Welcome back. New fallout this morning from the Epstein files release. Democrats are demanding answers after new reporting from MS Now and NPR showing the Justice Department withheld notes and memos concerning a woman who accused President Trump of sexually abusing her when she was a minor. MS Now reports the woman was interviewed by the FBI at least 4 times, but only documents concerning one of those interviews were made public in the Epstein files release. And this morning, we're learning more about how the DOJ was tracking those types of memos before this document release. Let's bring in MS Now senior legal reporter Lisa Rubin and former federal prosecutor Barrett Berger. Lisa, you are all over this. What are you learning now?
Well, Anna, this morning, I was looking to see whether the Department of Justice posted any new documents this morning regarding the alleged victim that we reported on yesterday. We thought maybe our reporting and that of NPR and an independent journalist named Roger Sullenberger might have changed what they were willing to post. I didn't find any new documents about the woman who accused both Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump of sexually assaulting her when she was 13 or 14 years old back in the 1980s. But what I did find absolutely stunned me, and that's a January 4th, 2026 memo from Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche. I just want to situate the date for you and our viewers. December 19th was the congressionally mandated date for compliance with the Epstein Files Transparency Act. And yet on January 4th, Deputy Attorney General Blanche is writing a 9-page memo to people at the department who were charged with doing the first level review of documents for production. And one of the things that the Deputy Attorney General instructs them to do in this memo is once they determine that something is responsive to one of the 9 categories that Congress mandates they need files for, he says there are some types of documents that we want you to particularly flag or tag while you're going through them in the electronic database. And one of them is something called a 302. Barrett knows this well as a former federal prosecutor, but a 302 is the form that the FBI uses to memorialize interviews. That's the exact kind of document that we reported yesterday was missing with respect to this particular accuser.
That is so interesting. And now we have a response from the DOJ as they are facing more and more questions about where these missing files are, why they're missing. And in a nutshell, their response is nothing to see here, saying anything that's been removed is for redactions to protect victims and would be promptly restored. And, quote, all responsive documents have been produced unless a document falls within one of the following categories: duplicates, privileged, or part of an ongoing federal investigation. So the question I have, Lisa, is do we know what category these specific documents would fall in, if that's the reason given for withholdings? And did they address specifically these documents we're asking questions about?
No, they did not. And in fact, I think the statement that you're referring to talks about documents that are deleted. Here, what we are discovering doesn't lead us to believe that any documents were suddenly published and then deleted. I want to be really clear. We don't believe that they were ever published as part of the Epstein files to begin with. And as for the categories that you're talking about, there is nothing in an FBI interview memo that could be considered privileged. There's nothing in an FBI interview memo that could be considered a duplicate. When the Department of Justice is talking about duplicates, they're usually talking about email chains. The obligation is to produce the most full version of that chain and not the first version of the message. It's not cognizable to me why it is that they withheld these.
Barrett, so much of this is out of the ordinary, to say the least. But how would other or prior DOJs handle a situation like this?
Yeah, I mean, when you look about producing case files, even in the routine run-of-the-mill case, what you would look to do and expect from any interview of a witness or somebody that was involved in the investigation, you would expect at the very minimum for there to be 2 documents. Handwritten notes taken by the agent who was conducting the interview, and then, as Lisa said, a memorialization of those. In a formal 302 report, if you're dealing with the FBI, each agency calls them something slightly different. At a bare minimum, every witness interview should have those 2 documents. So in, a drug case, any kind of a case that I was prosecuting, the first thing I would do as the prosecutor was to make sure that for every witness, each time they were interviewed, you would have those 2 documents. And just to be clear, every time a witness is interviewed, there's a new set of both of those documents. It doesn't matter if the witness is telling the truth. It doesn't matter if you go in there and within the first 30 seconds you think, I don't believe anything this person is saying. You still have to memorialize that, and you still have to produce that. So the fact that we have the absence of these documents that, by the way, it seems were produced at least in connection with Maxwell's trial is really glaring, and something that's pretty obviously glaring and would be to anyone who's prosecuted any kind of a case.
I want to play some of the comments we're hearing from Epstein survivors, who many of them were guests at the State of the Union last night. Take a listen.
We can choose accountability, and we can choose to build a country where no one, no matter how wealthy, connected, or politically insulated, stands above the law. Today, we are here proudly representing our sister, Virginia Roberts Giuffre. Standing with members of Congress and with survivors across the nation and across the world.
Back then I was a teenager, but I was really a child. I was looking for an adult to help protect me from what felt like monsters, only to find that the monster was him all along. Now I look to the government for help, and they're no better. Gaslighting and manipulating victims, the same tactics as Jeffrey and Ghislaine. How can anybody feel safe in this country when our president's sympathies are going to the former Prince Andrew and not to survivors?
I just keep thinking, how does what they are saying has been their experience compared to how victims are usually treated by federal prosecutors and the DOJ more broadly?
I have never seen victims treated like this in any case that I prosecuted that had identifiable victims. I mean, just to break it down, right? They have been just left out of the justice side of this on every single turn. You know, first with having information about themselves revealed that was not redacted, their names, nude photographs of them, things that we've heard from them that they never thought would ever see the light of day. To have that included in the production, and then at the same time to have, you know, interviews that they conducted, reports of those interviews not included, it leads them to wonder who's in charge of this, who's making sure that this actually is a complete and comprehensive investigation, and most importantly, who's looking out for them, who has their best interest, because right now it doesn't seem that anyone's really focusing on them or giving this case the type of attention they should deserve.